one of the things I love, for the filming, because in between shoots, we're just sort of hanging out a bit, and Jinpa's got all these gems, right? And he'll talk about, when I was young, I used to have, Trijang Rinpoche used to invite me for tea. It was like, oh my gosh. And actually, you were talking about, in one of these breaks, you were sharing about, these amazing Rinpoches that have now left us.
Yes.
But the qualities of Trijang Rinpoche, the qualities of Ling Rinpoche, the qualities of Dzong Rinpoche.
Exactly.
Maybe this is random, but I was thinking maybe you could share what you were sharing.
Well, I think I've been fortunate enough to be old enough, it's a funny thing to say, everybody's obsessed with youth, but to have met these great masters, Trijang Rinpoche and Dzong Rinpoche and my own teacher, Kyabje Dzemel Rinpoche, they were all from Ganden Shatse. And in the winter they would come down because Dharamsala is colder, especially Kyabje Trijang Rinpoche would come down. So I had a lot more opportunity to see them up close. And with Kyabje Trijang Rinpoche, he was probably the gentlest person I've ever met in my life. He has this quality of deep, profound gentleness and peace. And he's also a very well-known poet. So that poet side might also be part of that. And, when he was teaching, he was probably one of the most eloquent. Even his voice was very melodious. Whereas Kyabje Ling Rinpoche, who is His Holiness' other senior tutor, he was, as a person, he was quite reserved, quite stern. But he was an embodiment of wisdom. I mean, I've been to many teachings by him, but one of the most memorable one was one of the last major teachings he gave, 2 years before he passed away. It was in Sera Monastery. He taught Lamrim Chimo, Tsongkhapa's great treatise. And the final section of that is a very famous treatise on emptiness, Madhyamaka philosophy. And when he was teaching that part, once in a while he will get into these key sections and he would close his eyes and he would use his fingers to really kind of take us through a line of thinking, almost in a guided meditation of the line of reasoning that is being brought from Nagarjuna or someone. And it was just brilliant. It was like a kind of a live pointing out instruction right there. And you are sitting in the midst of over several thousand monks, and it is just total silence, and we are all just mesmerized watching him sitting on the throne, and he's not reading now. He's now just describing things with his eyes closed. So he was a true, master, a true, Manjushri, Nagarjuna, and then of course. Kyabje Ling Rinpoche was known for being, the Tibetans have a phrase called Doji Jikji Kusha Lumpa, Yamantaka in, flesh and blood. It was like, he was really seen as an embodiment of Yamantaka. Kyabje Dzong Rinpoche, on the other hand, was a very different personality. He exuded power, an amazing amount of focus. I mean, he even had those piercing eyes and a white goatee beard. It was just like quite stunning, and in his presence, I mean, you can't help but be attentive, just so I was very fortunate to have, and then of course, my main teacher has been, His Holiness. I've had the privilege to, from a very young age, attend many of his teachings in Dharamsala, and then from 85 onwards, having had the good fortune to be his interpreter, I've had many opportunity to, be with him, work with him. And of course, His Holiness is, I always tell my friends that whenever you are reading a Mahayana Sutra, a description of Bodhisattva's attributes and Bodhisattva's altruistic outlook and so on, just think of His Holiness. He is the true embodiment. And also one of the amazing things about His Holiness is that, when I was a monk, when I first began interpreting for him, I was a monk and he's a senior monastic member. And I was never pious. Piety was never part of my thing. I was more interested in the intellect, But I never felt judged by him. He has a very high standard for himself. He doesn't eat supper, after lunch, and he gets up very early in the morning. I never got up that early. 6:30 was my morning. But coming to the West, it turns out actually I'm an early riser.
It's all relative.
It's all relative. But in the monastery, but His Holiness was always amazing. So he has this ability to have a high standard for himself, but bring compassion and understanding with relation to others, so that there is no tendency to judge. And at the personal level, there is an amazing level of humility. And generally, and then on top of that, he has this deep sense of self-confidence. But generally, self-confidence and humility don't tend to go together. But in him, they really sit well. So, and of course, His Holiness, one of the amazing qualities of him is that to this day, he sees himself as a student of the Buddha. He's always studying. And this is, for me, one of the most important lessons on humility, because when I grew up as a monk, even in school before I became a monk, I've been gifted with a good intellect. So I always came first, and there was always quite a big gap between my grade and the next person.
Yes.
So of course, as a kid, it goes to your head because you start thinking you are special. And same thing in the monastery. When we were memorizing text at Dzongkha Monastery, my first monastery, the amount of verses I can memorize in a day was very different from the next, the best one. So when I came to Ganden to study, I was very sure of my intellect. So along with that came a kind of a pride, And seeing His Holiness, I told this story many times, that once we were at the airport waiting for the plane, and plane was delayed by 4 hours, and after all the kind of official requirements of talking to the protocols and all of this was done, he found a quiet corner and took out from his bag a text, which was Nagarjuna's text, and he started sitting down and reading it and studying it. And that was for me like, here is the great master who is still studying. So yeah, I've been very lucky. And then my own personal teacher at Labrang, the house teacher, who was my main teacher, was Gyabje Rinpoche. And he was a great Lojong advocate and a poet. So I studied with him not only the philosophy text, but also Tibetan poetry. And he was the one who emphasized the power of Lojong. Every now and then he would tell me that, the great Vajrayana practices, the sadhanas, the completion stage, Kala Chakra, all of these are great practices. But he said that when the push comes to the shove, at the end of the day, the one that could be most powerful and everyday beneficial is Lojong. He said, don't forget that.
And so you found his instruction to be true?
True, yeah. Especially when you're living in a much more complicated world. If you are a monk living in a monastery, your life is kind of sheltered, there's a more regularity, the kind of problems that you expect are part of that community life. But once you stop being a monk and living a layperson life, particularly in the West, then life gets very complicated. And in these kind of situations, I think Lojong is powerful.
You said that your teacher was a Lojong master. So why do you say that? What was it about him? What did you see that makes you think, oh, he's a great Lojong master?
Well, he had this ability to really kind of, whenever adversities arise, he really had this ability to immediately shift and reframe the situation so that the regulation takes place naturally. So even when for example, once I was shopping for the Labrang house, and my wallet got stolen in Indian town, and I came back really slightly disturbed, and and then Rinpoche told me, and he said, look, your wallet is already gone, the money is already gone. So the only thing that you can do really constructively is to pray that whoever stole it could actually use it well and benefit this person. That's a completely
I mean, who would thinking such a thing? You know, I mean, this is Lojong.
Yes.
Lojong in actual practice.
Yeah.
This is, you know, and then, of course, when you think it that way, then it doesn't disturb you that much. I mean, you are disturbed because you lost it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're not going to get it back.
Yeah.
So then, wish the person well. So,
it's really interesting because in one way, this Lojong practice, as you just described it, the instruction is completely opposite to the natural way you would think.
exactly, yeah.
And at the same time, there's a type of logic there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Right?
it is, yeah.
It's like, well, what's to do?
It's true.
We may as well hope this person makes use of it.
Exactly, yeah.
There's a sort of logic.
Yeah,
There's a sanity.
It's sanity.
And at the same time, it feels crazy. It's like, because it's opposite to what you would naturally think.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is
yeah,
what makes these teachings, I think, so powerful.
yeah.
Because we wouldn't, left to our own devices, we wouldn't come to
we
this
wouldn't.
place.
Yeah, we wouldn't think of that way. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's probably the most sane place to arrive at in the
Exactly.
most difficult situations.
Exactly. Yeah.